She was the only woman on the crew. The cameras caught her wandering through rot-softened floorboards, trailing her hand along warped timber walls, saying nothing, just reading the room the way a person reads a face. She wasn't the foreman. She wasn't the lead contractor. On paper, she was the designer. But over 13 seasons and more than 160 episodes, something quietly became clear to everyone watching. Maine Cabin Masters didn't work without Ashley Morrill. Today we're going to trace exactly how that happened, where she came from, what the show never fully explains about her role, and why the most important decisions made on every single build started with her. There's a version of Ashley Morrill that the show has told you about, and then there's the one that exists when the cameras pack up and drive home. The show version is the one that disappears when the heavy lifting starts, the one who gets gently teased by Chase for not picking up a hammer, the one who shows up at the tail end of a renovation with a set of throw pillows and some paint swatches, and somehow makes it all come together in the final 10 minutes of the episode. That's a useful character. Viewers like her. She's the emotional warmth in a show built around sawdust and construction noise. But she was born on January 27, 1976, in Orono, Maine. And the person who grew up in that house was considerably more complicated than the television version. Her father, Eric Morrill, was a professional builder. Not a weekend hobbyist, not a man who liked to tinker. A working builder whose entire professional life was organized around the idea that old materials had more value than new ones, that you looked at a structure before you changed anything about it, and that doing a job badly was a form of disrespect to the craft, to the history of the building, to the people who built it the first time. Chase absorbed that, but so did Ashley. The Morrill children grew up driving around Augusta with their father during pickup week, loading salvaged material into the back of the truck before anyone else could take it. This was not a quirk, it was a philosophy. Ashley went on to study graphic design at the University of Southern Maine. And this is the part most coverage of the show breezes past. Graphic design is not decoration. It is systems thinking applied to visual problems, color theory, spatial relationships, the way a human eye moves through a composition. The reason Ashley's cabin interiors work, the reason a 900-square-foot Maine hunting camp can be transformed into something that feels both cozy and considered without looking like a magazine set, is because she has spent her entire adult life training that specific set of skills. The instinct is real, but it is trained instinct. There is a meaningful difference. After graduating, she did what a lot of young Mainers do. She left. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. She ended up in Crested Butte, Colorado, a ski town at nearly 9,000 feet of elevation, built in the 19th century as a coal camp and later reinvented as a destination for people who wanted mountains and open space and something that felt authentic. The architecture there is functional, not decorative. Thick timber, stone, natural materials selected for survival in a harsh environment, not for trend. Ashley has said that Colorado was where her love for drawing fully came back. She was already making things, prints, patterns, hand-stamped designs, the high-altitude lodge aesthetic, the interiors of ski cabins and mountain retreats that prioritize durability and warmth over anything flashy. She was absorbing all of it. Whether she knew it consciously or not, she was building a design vocabulary that would become the signature of everything she did on Maine Cabin Masters a decade later. Here is the thing about her approach to cabin interiors that the show rarely stops to explain. She does not impose a suburban aesthetic onto a rural structure. She reads each cabin, the pitch of the roof, the grain of the existing wood, the materials that are already there, and she designs toward what the space should feel like, not toward what would photograph well for a network television reveal. Those are two different goals. Most renovation shows optimize for the second one. Ashley consistently pursues the first. That discipline traces directly to Crested Butte, and, before that, to a childhood spent around a father who believed the right material was always the one already in front of you. When she came back to Maine in her early 30s, she and her sister-in-law purchased the Potluck Shop, an antique and home goods boutique in Hallowell. They sourced salvaged barnwood furniture and vintage goods through the picking networks the Morrill family had been working for decades. This is where her real professional expertise was built, not on a television set, but behind a counter in a small Maine town, moving reclaimed objects from one context to another. The shop was operating years before Maine Cabin Masters ever premiered. By the time a production company called looking for people to put on camera, Ashley Morrill had already been doing this work for the better part of her adult life. The show didn't create her career, it found it. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The origin of Maine Cabin Masters is the kind of story that sounds like it was made up after the fact, but wasn't. The show came together through a chain of coincidences so specific that they only work because the people involved were already doing exactly what the show needed. A production company out of Denver, Colorado, Dorsey Pictures, was making cold calls to find builders who did something that was genuinely rare: rural craftspeople who salvaged and restored rather than tore down and rebuilt. The call didn't go to Chase Morrill directly. It went to a friend of a friend. The Morrill family's reputation for that specific kind of work, the Maine way of reusing what's already there, had traveled through enough conversations that eventually it reached a producer with a clipboard looking for television. Chase walked onto a job site and asked the crew if they wanted to be on TV. Ryan Eldridge, Ashley's future husband, was there. Nobody took it seriously. They went into what was then a Skype interview. This was before Zoom existed, looking, by Ryan's own account, exactly like men who had just come in from working in the Maine woods in January. Jared Baker showed up looking like he'd wrestled a bear on the way there. The production company loved them. But here is what matters about Ashley's entry into that process. She was not an afterthought. The show's premise required a design eye, someone who could translate the practical work of the crew into something a viewer at home could emotionally connect to. Chase and Ryan build the structure. Ashley makes you want to live in it. Without her, the show would have been a competent but cold document of construction. With her, every episode ends with something that feels like a home. She has said publicly that the fame that arrived with the show was not something she sought and is not something she particularly enjoys. She is private in a way that is unusual for someone on a nationally broadcast reality program. She would rather go unrecognized in a grocery store in Manchester than be stopped for a photo. What drives her is not the audience. It is the moment when a cabin that looked beyond saving becomes something a family will use for another generation. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. There is a misconception about Maine Cabin Masters that persists across all 13 seasons of the show, and it is worth addressing directly. A large portion of the audience believes Ashley Morrill is Chase Morrill's wife. She is his sister, the man standing next to her in almost every frame, the quiet foreman who organizes the logistics of each build, who keeps the operation running while Chase makes the big decisions about structure, is Ryan Eldridge. That is her husband. Understanding this changes the way the whole show reads. Ashley and Ryan grew up in neighboring towns in Maine. They knew each other for years before anything romantic developed. After a breakup, Ashley moved into Ryan's house as a roommate, a detail both of them discuss with the kind of amusement that comes from a story that worked out. Ryan describes what happened next with characteristic brevity. Ashley disputes his version of events for its lack of nuance, but the outcome is the same. They were married in 2016. The proposal happened in July 2014, the day after a Willie Nelson concert. Ryan chose the moment deliberately. Ashley has noted, more than once, that if you want to guarantee she is in a good state of mind, the 24 hours following a Willie Nelson show is your best window. She has described recurring dreams in which she and Willie Nelson are close friends. The proposal landed. Their marriage is, among other things, a professional partnership that extends far beyond what the cameras capture. Ryan is not simply a carpenter who sometimes appears on the show. He is the foreman of Kennebec Cabin Company, the business entity that underlies the entire Maine Cabin Masters operation. He and Ashley co-manage the Woodshed, a bar and restaurant at the Kennebec Cabin Company headquarters in Manchester. They are building a house together that was designed with enough space for Ashley to have a dedicated art room, because oil painting is something she has wanted to return to for years. They have no children, which they discuss lightly when asked. They have dogs, several over the years, each treated with the kind of seriousness most people reserve for children. The fan base knows the dogs by name. The couple is careful about what else they share. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. The editing structure of Maine Cabin Masters is designed around Chase. He introduces each cabin. He sets the deadline and the budget. He makes the structural calls. The episode is built on his authority. Ashley moves differently through the frame. She shows up at the start, disappears during the heavy build, and reappears at the reveal. The comedic rhythm of the show, Chase teasing her for avoiding the physical labor, Ashley teasing him back, reinforces the idea that she occupies a smaller portion of the work than he does. That is not what is happening. What the cameras don't linger on is the design work that runs the entire length of every build. Ashley is managing relationships with the local artisans and craftspeople who contribute materials and skills to each renovation. She is making the decisions that determine whether a cabin interior feels honest to its setting or feels like a suburban remodel dropped into the Maine woods. She is repurposing materials that other designers would replace, turning an old canoe into a bookcase, using paddles as ceiling fan blades, and doing it on the budget constraints the show is famous for keeping tight. Her ability to work with what is already in the space, rather than sourcing everything new, is one of the structural reasons those budgets hold. She is the primary decision maker on every final look, not in consultation. As the decision maker, the show's budgets average around $35,000 per renovation. For what that amount produces on screen, the work is not possible without someone who can look at a rotting cabin and see not what it is, but what it already contains. That is a specific skill. It is not common. And it is the skill that makes Maine Cabin Masters different from every other renovation show currently on television, where the answer to a design problem is almost always to buy something new. Ashley Morrill's philosophy, the one that said old materials have value, that the right approach to a structure begins with understanding its history, is operating in every single episode. Through Ashley, that's the inheritance. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. For 9 seasons, Ashley Morrill gave her design work entirely to the show. The cabins she transformed belonged to someone else. The aesthetic she developed, the rustic chic visual language that made Maine Cabin Masters feel like a specific place rather than a generic renovation program, lived in other people's homes. In May 2023, she decided to change that. Rustic County launched as a women-owned home decor brand, built entirely around Ashley's original artwork. The product line began with throw pillow covers, items she described as simple, immediate changes that can transform a space without requiring construction. The designs are her own watercolor and oil paintings, loons, moose, lobsters, blueberries, pine cones, florals, subjects that are unmistakably Maine, rendered in the rustic chic register she had been developing since her time in Colorado. She built the business with a team of longtime friends, not business contacts. The core collaborators had known each other for over 25 years, originally connected through their shared obsession with live music, specifically the jam band scene that has been a consistent thread through Ashley's personal life since the 90s. Steph Hayward handled legal and business management. Kat Antonioli took on marketing, branding, and e-commerce. The collaboration was not transactional. It was the kind of thing that only happens when you have been in a room with someone for decades and already know how they work. When Rustic County announced on social media in 2023, the response from the Maine Cabin Masters audience was immediate. The brand was picked up by People magazine in the launch period. In early 2024, after fans made their preferences clear through polls and direct requests, Ashley prioritized a dog-themed product line, an extension of the brand that speaks directly to the segment of her audience that has been following her dogs on Instagram as closely as they follow the show. She was explicit about why she started it. She said she loves the show and will always be part of it. But she wanted to create something that was completely her own, something that let her share her art directly with the people who had been watching her work for years. The show is a collaboration. Rustic County belongs only to her. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Maine Cabin Masters is currently in its 13th season on the Magnolia Network, and the show is not slowing down. Season 13 sees the crew renovating historic Maine cottages, century-old structures with the specific kind of complexity that comes from age, from island geography, from the fact that getting materials to a remote location is a logistical problem before it is a design problem. In an interview promoting the season, Chase described the experience of working on an island. Everything seems romantic until you try to turn the water on and something comes gushing down from somewhere you did not expect. Ashley and Ryan are both active on the season's builds, maintaining the family structure that has defined the show from its first episode. The summer of 2026 also brings a spin-off, Maine Cabin Masters, All In. The new program follows Chase and his wife Sarah as they renovate a historic property into a working bed and breakfast, the Waters Run Bed and Breakfast, in time for its opening. Ashley has spoken about the project with the particular enthusiasm she reserves for builds that connect existing craftsmanship to new use. The spin-off reunites the crew with artisans and craftspeople they have worked with over the course of the show's history, which is exactly the kind of thread Ashley tends to notice and care about. Rustic County continues to operate alongside the show. Ashley runs it alongside her core team, with products selling through the Rustic County website and through the Kennebec Cabin Company retail store in Manchester. New collections are developed through a process that includes the audience, polls, requests, direct feedback, which has produced a brand that reflects what the Maine Cabin Masters viewership actually wants to take home, rather than what a design company would assume they want. Ashley is 50 years old and based in Manchester, where she has lived since returning from Colorado. She works on the builds, she runs the brand, she co-manages the woodshed. She is building a house with an art room. She remains, by every available measure, the quiet center of everything the Morrill operation does. She never talked about this publicly, until now. Here is something that becomes obvious once you look at Maine Cabin Masters as a whole, rather than episode by episode. The show has always had two stories running simultaneously. The first story is Chase's. It is the one the structure of the program is built to tell. A leader, a crew, a deadline, a budget, a transformation. That story is clean and satisfying, and it is the reason people tune in. Chase is genuinely compelling television. He is knowledgeable, funny, and direct, in the way that people raised in rural Maine tend to be. The second story is slower and harder to see, because it lives in the spaces between the construction work. It is the story of a woman who came up in a builder's family, who was trained in visual design, who left Maine and came back with a richer design vocabulary than she left with, who opened a shop before the cameras arrived, who married a man who became the operational spine of a crew she also helps hold together, who built a brand from scratch while continuing to do the show, and who has spent 13 seasons being underestimated by the editorial choices of a television program that doesn't fully know what to do with her. Every cabin that Maine Cabin Masters has ever restored carries her fingerprint. The choices that make the interior feel like it belongs in that specific landscape, not imported from a big box store, not performing an aesthetic that has nothing to do with Maine, those choices are hers. The comfort viewers feel at the end of each reveal, the sense that the transformation is somehow right, rather than just impressive, is the direct result of someone who was taught from childhood that the right answer to a design problem was already present in the material in front of you. Eric Morrill passed away in July 2014, 3 years before the show premiered. He never saw what the two people he raised went on to build together. But the work is his. It always was. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. A cold call from a production company in Denver, routed through a chain of Maine relationships, that landed on a crew of people who were already doing something no other television show had thought to capture. Ashley Morrill is not the heart of Maine Cabin Masters because she is warm on camera, or because she handles the design, or because having a woman in a crew of builders makes for good television. She is the heart of it because of what she carries. A design philosophy built on 40 years of watching, learning, leaving, returning, and building things with her hands and her eye that were meant to last. The 13th season is airing. Rustic County is growing. The woodshed is open. A bed and breakfast is being built for a summer spin-off. And the woman who was once teased on camera for avoiding a hammer is running more of this operation than any single episode of television has ever made clear. So here is the question worth putting in the comments. Do you think Ashley Morrill gets the recognition she deserves for what she actually contributes to this show? Or has Maine Cabin Masters always been better at showcasing Chase than giving credit where the design work actually comes from? Let us know below.